Hi Guillaume, can you hear me?
Yes. Good evening, Jakub.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm all right. Where
It's
exactly
good
are
to
you
see you.
right now? Sorry, where exactly are you right now?
I am sorry, I didn't hear the question. I am in Aix-en-Provence. I am at my lab. Yes, yes, yes. I was quite wrong because I didn't even know that there was 1 hour delay between France and England.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
starts from here. It starts from here, so it's very rudimentary.
yeah. It can be a bit confusing, but yeah,
Yeah, it's just people don't travel that much.
yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you this even
Yes,
more, but like you are working for this National Center for Scientific Research, right?
yes.
So like, can you describe it to me a bit? Like, what is this institution?
Yeah, yeah, of course. If you consider, so basically, if you take most of the countries, normally all the research is organized at the university, by the university. And here actually it's just an independent national ministry that specifically relate to what they call fundamental research. So we are hosted in university. We work with lecturer and professor, with students as well. But our main task, if you want, we have quite a freedom to focus on research. Yes. I don't know if that helps. And if you want, the CNRS has been created just after the Second World War. And it's an organization, it's subdivided. I think there are like 50 sections, and all sections relate to physics, to all the kind of science that we deal with. And there is one section that is about interaction between human and environment. And Stone Age, for example, fall within that category of research.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in terms of archaeology, it's like focused mostly on prehistory and Stone Age, or are there like also other
No,
time
no,
periods of
you
archaeology?
can find all kind of time period and all kind of discipline.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a beautiful position. Like, yes,
right.
and it's a kind of job that just got Antonin this summer. I don't know if you remember, but he was just promoted as a CNRS researcher.
Oh, all right. I see.
Yeah, and Louise was also a CNRS researcher.
Right. We should start in like a couple of minutes. So I wanted to just make sure that like, do you have some kind of presentation or something?
Yeah, I did.
Would you like to try it, whether you can share it with us? Because like sometimes we tend to have like technical problems with it, so I want to make sure.
Here we are. Is it okay like that?
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah, we can see that.
Okay.
Nice.
Very good.
Have you like shown this presentation to, or like have you been presenting this to someone else as well before?
What do you see as a screen? Because I have two computers, and do you see, because I have another one with I have some text. Do you see the text as well or not?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me change. I don't know how we do that. No, yeah, like that is better, huh?
Yeah, now we can see only one slide.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah. And what was your question, sorry?
I was just wondering whether you have presented this already.
Yes, I did, not exactly on this, on this specific format, but I did present that a year ago, and we actually published the results already in 2018. So it's not something very new, but I think it's something quite insightful and something I like to speak with and to speak about, because I think it's It promotes a discovery, it's true, but archaeology is not based on discovery, but it promotes, I would say, quite important insights into with what kind of technology we deal and how we can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been recently in South Africa on the fieldwork, right?
Just in November, yeah, in November. And we are about to leave again in a couple of weeks. How is it going on your side?
All right. So no, I just wanted to know, like, how was that going on? Have you
Yeah.
anything?
No, things are going well, and yeah. It keeps busy, of course.
Martin's invited the building to a drinks party. This is what I'm talking about. You've got to grip the map house.
Sorry, this was one of our guests. Tim, did you want to tell us something, or?
No, sorry.
Oh, all right. Right. So the research in the South Africa is going on, right? Everything.
Yeah, it's going on, definitely. And Julia just started a postdoc to work on some of the material from South Africa, which is a good news. And she's gonna go there for 3 months. I'm just going to go there for a month, just for the time of the excavation. But this year should be nice because after all those years of the 2 last years of COVID, of course, it was going very slow. And now we start again to have a lot of students, which is very good because we have a lot of students from Zimbabwe, from Mozambique, from South Africa. And I will say it's some of the efforts that we put in the excavation is one of the duties, partly to take them with, you know. Yeah, I mean, they are great people, and it's a great pleasure to work with them.
All right, so like
I hope you meet them.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, let's see.
All right, it seems that like no one else is joining us, and
Okay.
I think we leave those 5 minutes for any late comers.
Okay.
Yeah, let me welcome everyone to our very first talk of the Hiller Return 2022. We are very happy to see quite many of you joining us. This time only remotely because of the current situation and the policy of university and colleges, unfortunately. So quite unusually, I am kind of hosting this whole meeting from my own room at the college, but such are times at the moment. So our today's guest is Guillaume Porraz, who is an archaeologist and a prehistorian at National Center for Scientific Research. And he specializes in the technical know-how associated with the creation and use of stone tools, and mostly, I believe, with the core reduction strategy and shine operator oriented of the on the kind of stone tool creation and assemblages. And he will be talking mostly about the site of Pres De Laure in France, so which was discovered in 2012. So without any further delay, Guillaume, I'm leaving this virtual stage to you.
Thank you very much, Jakub. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to present some of the work we are doing in the southeast of France. So, like Jakub introduced, so I am based in Aix-en-Provence, so in the southeast of France, and I am interested and specialized in lithic technology and trying to work mostly on late Pleistocene chronologies from the south part of Western Europe, but also from the southern part of Africa, mostly in South Africa. Today, I'm just going to take the example of 11 back pieces. You can see all of them on the first slide, actually. I'm going to speak a little bit about the chaîne opératoire, but not much, actually, Udi. I hope I will not disappoint you, Jakub, but it's a different approach. And actually, it's a discovery that we made at the site of Les Pres De Laure. And I think it's a discovery that is quite what we were discussing just briefly, which is quite insightful for the debates and the different questions that concern the lithic technology in general. And I put my name, but I put also other names, especially Antonin Tomasso and Louis Perdu, who are my two other colleagues with who I work in this project, but we have also other colleagues who work there, such as Verl Rotz at the University of Liège, and all people bring their own piece of data in this presentation. The talk might be quite long, so I will go quite quickly on the three main acts that you can see. I was not sure what will be the audience and how much people were familiar with the fundamentals or the basics in lithic technology. So I'm just going briefly to introduce some of the basics. After you're going to travel a little bit outside of England and discover the site of Les Pres De Laure in the southeast of France. You're going to also travel a little bit in time, and I'm going to just introduce the Gravesian period based on the regional record, because it's actually the period in which we're going to focus for this presentation. And finally, the main act, where I'm going to spend a little bit more time, which will be about the description and the interpretation of those 11 backed pieces. So here are actually a couple of major references that concern technology, and to a certain extent that concern stone tool technology, but references I think we should know, or at least we should be aware of when we engage such topic. So the first one that I have written to make technology visible is actually the Cyclopedia, or the Encyclopedia, which is a compilation of art, craft, and technique in a way that was promoting science, but also promoting the human mind and the human creativity. And the goal was really to collect, to expose, and to transmit the knowledge. I put this reference as well to not minimize the importance of recording past technologies. Sometimes of course, it is important to put in a frame and interpret, not to be misunderstood, but to record and to characterize the specific tools is also quite important in the process of knowledge. The second set of books that I put here, and that I have written the relation between human and technology. This, of course, with philosophy. Not all philosophers have discussed specifically the question of technology, except people like Gilbert Simondon. But technology is at the center of many discussions that we're going to deal with progress, or they're going to deal with nature, they're going to deal with knowledge, society, work, economy, and labor, and things like that. It's just to make sure that when we embrace the topic of stone tool technology, we are able somehow to promote a speech that is bigger than Stone Age, because actually it concerns the interaction of human with the environment, which is obviously thanks to technology that we interact with the environment. The other set of reference, the social dimension of technology, deal actually with social anthropology, and so the social dimension of technology, which is what is the history and what are the roles of artifacts in society, including their utilitarian, but also their non-utilitarian aspect based in a technical perspective. And those researchers, which are social anthropologists, are actually the one who elaborated the principles of study and who created a methodology. For example, the notion of chaîne opératoire doesn't come from archaeologists or from people specialists in Stone Age, but it comes actually from social anthropologists. And finally, the last set of references, you will see, I apologize for that, but it's mostly French references, but of course it exists in all different facets and in all different languages. But the last one was actually the material, the material culture. And we have researchers such as Durkheim, but also Lévi-Strauss, with the concept that material culture actually reveal a level of structure and meaning in a society. It was just really a very large review of the literature, but once again, just to make sure about what kind of discussion we are embracing. What are the fundamentals of the basic to study and actually to create a narrative on stone tool technology? I would say it's in 3 steps. The first step is actually the permanence, the durability of stone tool in human history and actually in human prehistory. We find the first stone tool at more than 3 million, 3.5 million at the site of Lomekwi in East Africa, and after we're going to find them all along. So there is a possibility of a long-term narrative, which is obviously very important, where we actually ambition to discuss the evolution of humankind. The second step here that in the middle, which is from mechanical constraint to rules of manufacture. So the analytical background of lithic studies is based on one basic principle, which is a fracture of conchoidal rocks. Conchoidal rocks are actually rocks where the fractures develop equally in 3 dimensions. So all the rocks that have been knapped during Stone Age are conchoidal rock. So the fracture of conchoidal rock is subject to 3 constraints, 3 main constraints that dictate the way the fracture propagates, because obviously the main important parameter is to control the fracturation of the rock. So these 3 main constraints, there are 3 main physical constraints, which are the mechanical properties of the rock that you have to adapt with. So it concerns the elasticity, the hardness, the homogeneity, and the toughness and other elements. So after, the second element is the geometric shape of the volume, which includes the longitudinal and the transversal convexities, the number of surfaces, and the angle of intersections between those surfaces. And the last constraint is the application of the force, which is the type and nature of the contact in terms of mode of application and in terms of motion. So we have these 3 constraints, and once these constraints are assimilated, once you understood these constraints, then they become rules of manufacture. And once you have this rule in mind, it is possible to control and to anticipate the fracture. And then you go to the notion of predictability and the notion of intentionality. All the fundamentals, everything that you're going to discuss or interpret based on stone tools are actually based on these fundamentals. And the last one, after its permanence, in the middle we have the rules, and at the end is the readability, is that the rock actually records the different steps in the operation, which means that you have the possibility not only to read on the rock the direction of the different removals, but you also have the possibility to establish a relative chronology between the removals. And because it is a 3D object, you have the possibility to put this piece in this 3D puzzle. And then you accumulate and you multiply these observations in order to reconstruct the chain operatoire or the reduction sequence. When we study stone tools, actually, there are 3 main steps. The first step is the techno-economy. So we're going to characterize the raw material and we're going to characterize the resources. Okay, this is a specific setting. We're going to shortly discuss with that in this presentation. The second part is a techno-operative, which is how people have been doing to transform, to fracture the rock. Okay, so this is a description of how people have been doing the things. And the last thing is a techno-functional characteristic, and that relates specifically to the tools. The tool is, of course, the objective of all production. And to describe a tool, you will actually characterize the physical parameters of the tools. Physical parameters in terms of dimensions, but also in terms of delineation, in terms of sections, in terms of angles, and how these different tools combine. Then there is a different specific methodology for that, but it's just to be aware and somehow what are the different methodology involved in that. And for example, and after we have an interpretative framework, when, for example, we're going to discuss with a tool, we're going to discuss about the efficiency of the tool, and of course, the efficiency of the tool is interpreted in comparison with the task that was intended. We're going to discuss the tool for its kinetic, right, which is how it is integrated with the other sub-technical systems, because the tool that we are studying is only a part of a bigger system. We're going to, once again, with the tool, we're going to speak about the ergonomy of the tools, and that relates to the body technique of the people. And finally, we're going to speak about his style or his aesthetic, and that relates to the general symbolic, or I wrote beliefs. I'm not sure this is the best word, but this is how I wrote it. So when we're going to study those stone tools, it's of course to record. Once again, I think this is important to record the different elements and to interrogate the different forces that have actually forced the technical expressions, either in terms of adaptation, but also in terms of transformation and evolution. And we have all different dimensions, which of course are very simple, but it's just to embrace the different possibility. We have an historical dimension that's going to deal with the question of seriation, the question of transition, which deal with the continuities and the discontinuities. We have a geographical dimension. You're going to deal with the cultural areas. You're going to deal with the question of interaction, population dynamics, and so forth. We have a socio-economical dimension, questions like innovation, transmission, specialization. We have an ecological dimension, which is actually the straight adaptation to the raw material, but also to the subsistence strategies in terms of mobility, how mobility impact technology or how technology impact mobility. Of course, all these elements are part of a same system. We have an anthropological dimension. We can speak about cognition. We can speak about motor abilities. We can speak about lateralization. We have a technological dimension, which actually I would say is not the one that we are the most familiar with in archaeology, but we can discuss questions like miniaturization. We can discuss questions like ballistic, like design, like ontogenesis, like invention, which actually are all concepts that are merged within the philosophy of technique. It's really here that you're going to find all these different elements. And you have also a symbolic dimension, which is the non-utilitarian facets of technique, or the semiotic, which is the sign, what is the meaning of technology as a sign within a society. So those 11 back pieces that I shortly introduced, so it's the pieces that we have found at the site Les Pres De Laure. And so I have a basic question, which is what do they tell and what can we learn from those 11 backed pieces? I'm just checking the time. Okay. So here is just an introduction of the region of study. So it's a Paleolithic in Western Europe. We are in the Liguro-Provençal arc. It's quite a specific setting, actually, when we discuss about population dynamics. It's one of the corridor, actually, the southern corridor of the Alps. And when we discuss about interactions between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, all over the Upper Paleolithic, or even in periods, in older periods, well, this is quite a critical period to study. It actually connects the Rhône Valley with the Po Valley. What is specific here is actually you have really the connection of the Alps with the Mediterranean Sea that creates a specific corridor also in terms of interaction. And there have been many researchers who have been working here on the economy of the raw material or the transfers of raw material based on quite a good knowledge of flint distribution in the landscape. So here is just a map showing the different distribution of flint and all the different works that have been done with frequent distances of circulation that goes over 200, 300 or 400 kilometers. Even during the Middle Paleolithic, we have circulation here that goes over 200 kilometers, which is quite rare during that period of time, but that can be explained within those specific geomorphological settings. Just to introduce how actually we discover the site, but it's based on the circulation of raw material, and we are working in this specific in the pre-Alps here, and we found many of the flint and the different facies. You have here the Valanginian. We can speak later if you want about the petroarchaeology and how we can characterize and track a specific flint from its geological source to an archaeological site, but somehow based on the study of the sites that were on the littoral, we knew that people were quite regularly, let's say frequently, or on the long term, we have a continuous signal of flint coming from the pre-Alps and going to the littoral. So it's in that dynamic that actually we had a large archaeological survey in different environments. Of course, there was a strategy with the survey, and one of them was to survey the alluvial plain, which is actually where have been trapped the sediments that might be of interest for archaeological research. And actually, it's we find the Jabron Valley, which is quite a specific setting because it's an anomaly within the area. When we are in this part of the Alps, it's actually it's mostly canyons. It's very specific. And here we had these valleys that were open for 5 kilometers long, 300, 400 meters wide, with quite a rich archaeological record in that area. So we embrace the project and the discovery that was not at the scale of a specific site, but the site is actually the valley, and we have different coring all along this valley, but also different excavation. We have excavated different shelters like the Baume-Rouillé, Baume de Montiver, which are two Mesolithic sites. We have other test pits in an open air environment, but there is one main archaeological site that is actually at the core of the project, which is the site of Les Pres De Laure. So the site of Les Pres De Laure that we discovered in 2013, and we are excavated every year for 4 weeks for now, and it's a project that is quite a long-term project, which is why it is a long-term project. I mean, quite for multiple reasons, but of course, one of the main reasons is actually its richness for its archaeological record. We have repeated human occupations at the site. We have also a very fine low energy of sedimentation, which means that the artifacts that have been preserved are actually well buried into the sediments, but also we had a rapid sedimentation, which means that we are also in a situation to find organic artifacts and organic preservation like bones and also charcoals and other elements. Just the mapping of the area, because we are in, I'm not sure how much you are familiar with open air sedimentation, alluvial sedimentation and things like that, but we are in a system of nested terrace, and we have actually 3 main terraces, one MIS3, one MIS2, and one late MIS2 terraces with occupation that goes from the Middle Paleolithic, with occupations that are dated at about 45,000 years ago, so really the end of the Middle Paleolithic. So far, we have only reached those deposits in a test pit, and after we have occupation from the Gravetian and from the Epigravetian. So here, just because we're going to focus on the Gravetian, and so I just wanted to bracket it a bit more. The chronology of the Gravetian in general is about 32 to 23. So here we quite have a long chronology for the gravation, between 30 to 23,000. And here you have some example of concentration of stone tool débitage. You have some spot with charcoals, with likely consisting of small combustion features. We have some fauna and things like that. So we move to the third act, which is from the Pres De Laure. We're going to introduce the iconic Gravesian based on the regional record. Once again, I'm not sure how much you're familiar with all these chronocultural expressions, but the Gravesian in the area is quite well known based on the site of the Balsy-Rossi, which is very complex of sites. There are more than 15 archaeological sites that are concentrated that are next to each other, that have been excavated at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. So it really belongs to the history of the research. And in this specific area, we have long occupation starting from the Middle Pleistocene and going until the early Holocene. There's a long collection of Venus associated with the Gravesian, and I'm sure you know many of them. I'm not sure you know those from the Balsy-Rossi, because once again, it was excavated quite a century ago, so the context is probably not perfect, but you have more than 13 Venus in different rocks that comes from the Alps, and here is just to give you an overview of those figurines. During those Gravesian period, we have also many burials that have been found in the Balsy-Rossi, burials of individuals, burials with 2 people, burials with 3 people, and you can see how rich they are. They are nested with shell bead, with ochre, with technical elements. It's just to promote the Gravesian culture, or the Gravesian society, and the Gravesian organization as something which is presented as pan-European, but it's very rich period of time. So the Balsy-Rossi, we are just here at the border with Italy, but I wanted to introduce the Kosker cave, which has been never been excavated, but has been discovered in 1991. Actually, it has been discovered by people who were underwater, exploring underwater karstology, and found this site, which is the entrance today is underwater. So we have more than about 200 animals. We have negative hands. We have different kind of things with 2 main occupational phases. We have a Gravesian phase, which is dated at about 27,000 KBP, but I believe the chronology is likely to be more extended, and we have a continuation with the Epigravesian, so it crosses the last glacial maximum. When we discuss the Gravesian, actually there is quite a rich literature and a rich research on the Gravesian, about physical anthropology, about how the Gravesian relates to specific ecological niche in the environment, and it's quite a very lively period of research. It is defined initially, it is defined on one specific tool type, which is the gravette point that you can see here. It's really a specific point. It's actually a projectile point. It's very straight, and it has a trihedral section, and it's quite a typical tool that I never found even in the literature, in other contexts, at other period of time. So it's really an innovation that is very enshrined in the Gravesian period. But this gravette point, of course, presents a variability, and we can have an operative variability, which is that we're going to adapt to the type of the blank, and it's going to explain why we have similar tools which present different technical operations on it. But we have also a morphometric variability. As you can see here, the back are not anymore straight, but they are convex. So where do we move from one type to the other type. And we have also other alternative morphologies, which has, for example, on the left, the point at the altern. So you have it's a double-backed points. We have tongued points. You can see all, just to introduce actually the richness of the technology, even if here I'm focusing on one specific sphere, which is actually the kinetic sphere. It relates to hunting, it relates to weapon technology. So we observe many transformations, many innovations during the gravation associated with the kinetic sphere in terms of hafting strategies, in terms of composite designs, but also in terms of projectile modes. And for all of that, it's all technical characters to be promoted. So here we are back to the site of Les Pres De Laure, and actually we're going to go slowly to the study of the 11 back pieces. I was briefly mentioning to Jakub that actually the results of the study are already published. It was published in 2018. It's Antonin who led this kind of study, but I am quite happy to promote those results again. So here was the surface of excavation of the stratigraphic unit 17. At that time, it was excavating 9 square meters. It's a paleosoil, right? We find quite different artifacts, different archaeological features that were associated. They were quite low density, and we have two dating with one dating at about 25, 24, and one dating at about 23.5 and 23,000 years BP. Since that time period, we have largely extended the window of excavation. Here, the picture I was showing you is on the left of the grid, but you can see that the excavation has been extended, and actually we observe a complete different organization, which just show, it's a pattern about spatial organization that we can discuss later if you are interested. So the stratigraphic unit 17 is quite thick. Huh? It's about 15-20 centimeters. It has a slight slope toward the northeast. Even if we are in a rapid and low energy sedimentation, we are in a process of paleosoil, which means that we had the vegetation came and somehow contributed to homogenize the deposit. And when we work at a micromorphological scale, we will see that actually it's an accumulation of different microstratigraphic units. It's a succession of flood, but no evidence for mass movement. So here is a detail on the main excavation area at that time. So 9 square meters. You can see the teeth of a horse that is here. We actually had 3 mandibles that were discovered. We had different features that are iron-rich feature, right, of different colors. We have limestone blocks that correspond to blocks that have been transported and used by people to frame the space and to organize their space. We have also lithics. Here you can see that they are not typical at all as the gravation, but once again, the technology is not only based, it has a back noise for many things. And here you have some flakes and some large elements. And here, for example, just some cobble that were briefly shaped and used in percussive activities. The techno-economic signature was very special, very rare blades, macro tools, pebbles, so very specific window. And we have 13 back pieces. So we have 2 gravette points, which are those typical elements characterizing the gravation. And we have 11 back points that we discovered for the first time. So it's a discovery during excavation of a concentration of 11 back points that were dispersed around the fragment of a bone that was really badly preserved. It's about 30 centimeter by 20 centimeter. We were lucky enough, or I mean, the logistic was good enough at the time to identify this discovery during excavation, and we extracted the discovery as a block, and we plastered it, and we excavated it in laboratory with gloves, with a 3D scan and photogrammetry, thinking that the concentration, the association, and the distribution of the find at the beginning was suggesting that those elements could be only one feature, only one element. So here you have an example of the drawing of the different back points and how they distribute around the discovery, and the different questions that were associated with the study were what was the nature of the bone fragment, what is the technology of those back pieces, which is the technology, it means what are their attributes, what were the functional traces, what could bring experimentation in that, and finally, what kind of interpretation and reconstitution we can have with this specific concentration. So we had a zoom analysis because the bone was not identifiable how it was. So we could secure the fact that it was a bone from a deer, and probably a red deer. And based on the CT scan, we could hypothesize that it was likely to be a bone rather than antler. When we moved to the pieces, so we could see that there were two sets of local raw materials. So the first one is a Valanginian flint, and it's a Cretaceous flint that we find in primary formation just close of Les Pres De Laure, actually just south of Les Pres De Laure. It was 8 pieces, 8 back pieces that were made from this specific flint. And after we had 3 additional pieces that were made from a tertiary flint that we also find in the local environment. So somehow the idea that those 11 back pieces were based on only 2 blocks of raw material. So just affirming or confirming the evidential character of these technical objects. Here are the back pieces. It's I mean, I kept it from last time because actually I like to watch them, and I am happy that you look at them as well. You know, that you think about what catch your eye. Actually, you know, just I know you cannot manipulate those pieces. I know you're lacking a lot of information, but somehow what catch your eye, you know, in terms of morphology, in terms of homogeneity, in terms of, and that's it. So the bladelets that have been used as blanks to manufacture those back pieces have been all detached from the edge of flakes. So it's a specific reduction strategy. You use a flake, and on the narrow face that you prepare, you're going to extract the bladelets following a unidirectional reduction system. What is important is like most of them, which is 8 on 11, are slightly twisted. Okay, so the twist is actually the transversal curvature, right? It's like if you take the profile, it's curved or straight, but if it's in the longitudinal axis of the piece. But if you take the transverse axis, you will see that the piece will be slightly twisted. The twist is also an invention. It's also an innovation. It's not like you're going to find twisted pieces in all the different collection. What is exactly the benefits of this innovation, of this twist thing, is not clear at all. But in this specific case, we can see that there is a relation between the twist and the location of the back. Okay, there is whatever it's an adaptation to the blank, or it's already part of the functional intention, is something that will have to be discussed with other elements. And actually, we have to do the study of the bladelets that we have not done so far. So they are all questions to be considered. So once they selected the bladlet, you always have direct percussion for the back, and we subdivided the pieces in two parts because you can see that they make an angle in their back. So the straight back, we call it the back, and the one that is oblique, we call it truncature. So for the back, it's actually just direct percussion for regularization, and for the truncation, we have a direct percussion plus an inverse regularization, which just means that a little anvil was used, and just to the anvil, the interest of the anvil is actually to minimize the reverberation of the percussion, which is going to amplify the risk of causing fracture at the time of the manufacture. So you can see that this is a delicate operation, and they slightly switch their technique of manufacture when they were on the truncation. And after, you have a marginal nibbling, which is restricted to a portion of the cutting edge, and the portion of the cutting edge is actually the one which is close to the apex, which is very close to the point. So with this idea in mind, when we start to make the description, the idea is, of course, to systematize the characterization, but also to see if there is a morphotype that is emerging from those studies. So what we observe is that we have a high degree of homogeneity in terms of morphology. Here you have the different detour of the pieces, and the three main elements of variability that we consider, which actually is the distal point, the proximal point, and the angle between the truncation of the back. We observe quite an important variability in terms of length, because we go from 12 to 22 millimeters for pieces that are complete. So it's quite an important variability, but there are other elements that vary very little. And among those elements that vary very little, it's mostly the elements that concern the distal part. It's actually the inflection angle here between the truncation and the back. This is here the angle at the point, but it's also the thickness and the width at this specific element. At that time, Antonin was doing a postdoc at the University of Liège, and he was promoting some functional studies, and he was also working, as I already mentioned, with Verrot and other colleagues that were on that, and they did a study on those elements, and most of those back pieces shows indication of use, and the combination of use wear traces, so meso and micro traces, including residues, suggests that those elements were used as barbs that were hafted in rows, with the proximal part being the technological part that was oriented toward the apex. So based on that, so we had the morphotype, right, with the description of those different pieces. Then there have been a functional study of those back pieces, and then there have been a set of experimentation in order to test the different hypotheses. Based on all those different barbs that were used as experiment, then have been studied for functional analysis and compared to the archaeological material. And you observe three main elements, which is that you always have a force, axial force, which related to the percussion at the time of the impact within the aft. You have dispersed bending in the edge, and finally you have lateral force. And all experimental results provide functional traces that were similar to the one observed on the archaeological material. So the results then were crossed with the spatial analysis, because you remember that actually we had this element, so we could select and retrace all the different backed implements in a spatial distribution. For each barb was considered the orientation, the damage intensity, and to finally evaluate the position in the row. Because the bone fragment was so altered, it was impossible to reconstruct the bone point, but we went into the literature and actually scanned the different morphology of bone points that were existed, and finally proposed this reconstruction for the barb point. So the interpretation of the discovery is that the concentration of the 11 back pieces results from the decomposition of a composite damaged barbed point. Those 11 barbs present a straight back and an oblique truncation that was secure on a red deer bone point, and finally allowing a restitution of the design and a functioning of the weapon, which is the oldest so far that has been proposed. As short elements of discussion and in trying to get a little bit further on that aspect, once again, I think what is important is to promote stone tools for what they are, which are technical objects with memories. They are not categories, right? And it's quite important to develop, to characterize and to record the physical properties of those elements, because we have to remember that they exist because of their physical characteristic. We have to favor disciplinary questions within multidisciplinary perspective. That is to say that, of course, we are part of a research on archaeology, on Stone Age, in human evolution, where all the different disciplines have to speak to each other, but we should also promote the research questions that deal with your own interest. And in that specific sense, when we study lithic technology, we are not only studying Stone Age technology, but we are also interrogating the question of technology in human evolution in a broad sense. And finally, the point is trying to build a catalog, to build a cumulative knowledge that is based on selected data. And when you do your different research, it is important somehow to hierarchize the different kind of information, and the hierarchy is always based on the archaeological sites on themselves. The archaeological sites can establish different filters in terms of the quality of information. There are not that many composite weapons that have been preserved and that we are aware of. We have all of them actually are associated with Magdalenian, which postdate the last glacial maximum. And here you can see the different elements from Pesvent, which are all different morphology. So at Les Pres De Laure, the manufacture of a composite weapon was based on the selection of raw materials that were locally available. It was a routinized production of twisted bladelets. There were a clear techno-functional template, which is a functional geometry, but the length was a parameter that was variable. Sorry. There was a transformation and operation on different raw materials that were involved in the manufacture of this weapon, not only flint, but also animal and organic content. And finally, it is one hunting equipment amongst other weapon technologies. We have to remember that those was associated with other type of back pieces, and these other back pieces show a complete different pattern. So barbed composite weapon technology were ensured in the upper Paleolithic. The origins and developments are all things that we should investigate. What was important for us is that those specific back pieces were very similar to the lamellescalen that are associated with the Magdalenian. And it's quite important in terms of discussion because those two techno-complex show very different technological tradition, but we have the possibility eventually to track innovation that actually were part of different technological tradition. And finally, this is the discovery and the recording of prehistoric design. And it was finally the word that I wanted to promote in this discussion, which was about stylistic and functional solution, which is one of the key debates in lithic technology. One of them is not the main one, but it's quite important. And actually, how design is a convergence of experience, knowledge, and also art. This corresponds to a fundamental structure. And in technology, the fundamental structure is not only utilitarian, but it's also a non-utilitarian facet for humans. Well, thank you very much. I hope it was clear and that you could understand my English. Sorry for that.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for this whole detour from like very general background of how lithic tools are being analyzed and understood right until these very specific examples of Pres De Laure. It was really very informative. And as usual, if someone from guests we have here has any questions, just don't hesitate to write them down in the chat. I will read them out, or just raise your hand and you can ask the question directly. To give you some time, I will start with my questions. So these bar point and composite weapons you've been talking about right towards the end of your presentation. What is the current hypothesis? Like, is it considered kind of like a local innovation which was kind of developed at different parts? Because as you showed, it was developed at different areas as well, or was it more like a response to I don't know, like climatic change or kind of like broader social development within the Europe?
Yeah, I mean, barbs is a category of action, right? I mean, it's like blades, or it's like points, you know, it's like a category of action, and those categories of action appear and disappear at different times of the history. There are people who can recognize barbs within during the Middle Paleolithic. You know, it's what are the hypotheses for those people. For sure, when we start to develop to observe the development of miniaturized technology, which includes bladelets or small implements, things like that, this relates to a change in the hafting strategies, and then we expect a different way of hafting your pieces, and the barbs being one of those innovations that associate with this element. If we take the record, it's I would say it's all along the Upper Paleolithic so far. I don't see it. I see it as a technological implementation. I don't see clearly any clear link with climatic forces or climatic driving, but for sure it relates to an amelioration in hunting technologies, and so in a way it's optimizing for those people the way of getting their resources.
All right, thank you. You also mentioned that like there were made experiments with these composite weapons and like creation or like manufacture of those backed lithic tools. So I was just interested, like how much skill does it take to produce such tool? Like how much learning does it take for a person to create such backed lithic tool?
Yeah. For the experimentation, it's a broader knowledge that only replicating the backed implements, right? Because after there was the glue, there was the bone points, there were the use of organic rape this requires not only knowledge, but it requires really a general setting and knowledge, obviously, to produce those backed elements. I don't know how I would say it. I mean, it's just to be aware of the steps. You know, it's I don't see it as something that is complex to replicate. I don't see any major difficulty for those people at that time to produce the specific pieces. And actually, the pictures that we have from Les Pres De Laure looks quite eventual, quite random as well, in the sense that, okay, there are 2 blocks around and selected that. And you can see as well that the certain variability that exists between the implements suggests that actually the system on its own allows some differences in the degree of or the quality of realization. But after it requires at least to master the principles and to control your body. Yes.
Right. So it could have been pretty easy to reproduce this technology, even by someone who didn't have like any prior experience or.
Oh no, Jakub, no. You.
All right. So there must have been some level.
It goes with an experience. No, sorry, I should have started from scratch. Yeah. No, it goes with an experience. But I will say, if your daily life or if your experience include that in your daily life, I don't see it as an operation that was difficult. I'm not saying that everyone can do that. But this is not something that is hardly reproducible.
All right, thanks. You mentioned or like presented also this. Now, sorry for the pronunciation of them, but the Grotte Cosquer, the
yes.
Balsirossi, and like Pres De Laure. What are the kind of major similarities between like linking like these 3 areas within the wider region, and like what would be the major differences between them according to you?
Yeah, so far what we can see is that there are all 3 different places. There are all places that have been occupied and reoccupied several times. Just speaking about the Gravation period, but it goes beyond the Gravation period. So we can see that those 3 places were reoccupied several times, and actually they show a different integration in the landscape based on the discovery once again. But we had the discovery of a weapon point at Les Pres De Laure. We have the discovery of those graphic expression in Cosquer. We have the discovery of those symbolic and ritual elements as well at the Balsirossi. And somehow it suggests that not only the domestic space was constructed, but it was also the whole territory, most probably, that reflected a close interaction and representation of the environment.
All right. So can we say that there was like a major difference between all 3 these areas and like populations that were occupying them and groups that were like?
I expect the people to be the same. I mean, they were occupied at the same time. Based on the raw materials, we can see that, well, we have the raw materials that we find at Les Pres De Laure. They are found at the Balsirossi. They are found near Marseille, not at the Grotte Cosquer, because so far it has never been excavated. But it's quite an important and dense network at that time based on the archaeological signal, right? It's also a story that is full of palimpsests, so it's not easy to get to the original picture, but the assumption is that those people were interacting and were aware of other people in other places very well.
All right, and like more general question, but like at the beginning, you've mentioned this like number of dimensions in interpretative framework of lithic tools and like their production. And so are these still kind of developing? Are there any like recent categories being added there? Like among one of those were like those socioeconomic, technological, you know, aesthetic and stuff. These are the ones I'm talking about. And like, is there general agreement of these, that there's like a set of categories that you have to take into consideration when you are analyzing lithic tools, or like some researchers tend to, I don't know, neglect some of them or believe that they are not important, and while others are I don't know, even taking some others into consideration? Or is it like broadly agreed that, well, here is the set of the we need to take into consideration all the time, and it's the way it is, basically?
Yeah, my point was very neutral. It was more to be aware of actually what are the different dimensions, or actually what kind of narrative we can elaborate based on the stone tools. I believe then all those different dimensions are very different. And it's hardly conciliable to discuss, for example, anthropologic aspect about motricity, and to develop in the same time questions that relate to processes of miniaturization or technological trend, things like that. But I will say it's quite important to be aware, obviously, but also to revendicate in which dimension you like to develop your own intellect.
All right, so researchers tend to specialize in one or another dimension.
Yes, I think so. I would say the main interpretation related to space, time, and social and socioeconomic implications. Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, that's it from my side of and my questions. It doesn't really seem that there are any questions from our guests. So let me just tell you once again, like, thank you very much for giving us this presentation. And yeah, good luck with your fieldwork and research at Pres De Laure.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you soon. Take good care.
All right. Have a nice rest of the day.
Cheers. Cheers. Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you.